Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Now today's video is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to be doing a step-by-step tutorial of exactly how I create a book cover completely from scratch to a final product. What we're going to be actually doing here is showing you how you can level up from a really basic looking book cover like this, different tips, different tricks that I use to implement into my book creation to make a book that goes from something like this into something a lot more professional. Now, book covers on Amazon KDP are super important because it's ultimately the first thing that your customer is going to see when they're scrolling through Amazon. So making sure you've got your book cover right is really, really important. So like I say, there's going to be a couple of things, a couple of tips and tricks I drop through this video. So I suggest you watch the entire thing. It might be a little bit slower, but I wanted just to include everything in there so that everything you need to know hasn't been missed out. Just because making a book cover, there's going to be loads of different things I do on my way through. You might want to just see the whole thing and just pick up things as I go along. I will try and leave timestamps in the description below and also at the bottom of the video, so you can kind of skip through to certain main points, but I would, like I say, generally suggest watching the entire thing because you could probably learn quite a lot as we make our way through. So in this video, as I previously mentioned, we're going to be trying to level up this book. So we're going to be designing an animal coloring book for kids cover, and this is the one we're going to be starting with and trying to level this up into a normal book cover. So the first thing you need to do before you even start making your book cover is get your dimensions correct. And the first thing I will do is go to kdp.amazon.com/cover calculator, put in the information here. So for ours, we're going to go for a paperback. We're going to go for black and white. The paper type is going to be white paper. Page turn direction left to right. Then the measurement unit is going to be inches and interior trim size. For this one, we're just going to go for 8.5 by 11, which for those of you that don't know is an A4 book. And the number of pages, we're just going to go for 100. With this, generally speaking, the only two things that will probably change with the book you're making is the size of the book that you want and also the number of pages. These should all generally stay the same, apart from maybe if you're doing a different interior type, so maybe it's a colored interior. But generally speaking, these will all stay the same. So just feel free to copy these and then just change it with your interior size, whether you want a 6 by 9 or an 8.5 by 11, then obviously the number of pages. And then just press this calculate dimensions button. And what that would do is it will show you the dimensions that you need for your Canva file. So we need a width of 17.475 inches and a height of 11.25 inches. So if you go into here, I've actually already done this in Canva, but you can see in the resize here, I've got this 17.475 as my width and 11.25 as my height. And then once you jump back into your cover calculator, just press download template, and that's going to download the template that you need to drop into your Canva file. Once you've done that and dropped it into your Canva file, it should look something like this. And to make sure you've got all of your dimensions correctly, if you just leave it exactly as it is when you drop it in, and then just pull it up to the corners, it should fit exactly into both the top left and the bottom right corner if your dimensions are correct. If it looks a little bit skew-if, let's just say, for example, this corner was correct and it looks something like this, and you've probably got your dimensions wrong, but it should fit perfectly in your canvas because essentially your canvas is built off the dimensions that you got from here, which is built off this entire template here. So this gives a really good distinction between your front cover and also your back cover. So the first thing I would do once this is in your file is just go to the transparency and bring this down quite a bit so it's not so clear on your page. And then I would just go to these three dots here and then just press lock. So this background is locked in place regardless now. That's going to be there so we know exactly where the difference is between different elements on our pages, on our front and also our back cover. Now the first really important tip that I'm going to drop in here, and I actually have included it in the video that I've made of this on my KDP Mastery course. You can check that out in the description below if you want to look at that course. The first thing I will do is just drop in a square here because obviously you need to have a background for your book. But a lot of people, what they'll do is just bring in this square here and then just pull it all the way across and just have a consistent background for your book. And this is going to be the background color. Choose whatever color you want. That's not necessarily a bad thing to do, but the only issue with doing this is if you have another element on your page, it's very difficult to get the reference points right. So what I mean by this is Canva will reference different elements on your page against the element behind it. So this element here behind, the middle part of this element is going to be shown here by this pink line here. So if I want to put something in the center of my page, you can see this pink line comes down here. But Canva doesn't actually know that this is a book cover. All it thinks is it's just another Canva design. So it doesn't actually know the difference between a front cover and a back cover like we're doing here. So what I would suggest doing is just putting one rectangle on one side of your page for your front cover, and then just copy and pasting that and then having another one behind it for your back cover, and then just sort the ordering out as you need to. I then pull this transparency all the way down to something like 50, just so you can see the difference between your front cover and your back cover. And what you can see now, when we're moving this element around, because Canva is referencing the shape behind, so this half of the page, I now know exactly where the middle of my front cover is, whereas previously Canva was just assuming that this was the middle of my front cover because Canva doesn't know it's a front and a back cover design for your book. So that's a really important tip. You just have the difference between a front cover element and also a back cover element, just to show you exactly where the center of both your front page and your back page are when you're creating your book cover. So once I've done that, generally what I'll do is I'll increase the transparency of the front cover that we want and then just reduce the back cover, because we don't need to worry about the back cover just yet. And the front cover is the main thing we want to focus on, and now we know exactly where our reference points are. So the first thing I'm going to do is choose a color for our animal coloring book, and because it's animal coloring, I'm going to go for something like a green, a little bit lighter than that. That's a little bit dark. We're going to go for something like this. We can now get rid of this square that was just used as an example. And if you want to, just reduce this transparency ever so slightly so you can start to see where the background appears and you know where your edges of your front cover is. But the only issue with doing this is reducing the transparency will change the color of your background. So I'm going to generally keep it as 100 because I roughly know, having done this so many times, where the edges of my borders are. So there's our back cover for our book. And like I say, we're going to be using this as our example. So I'm just going to take the front cover from this and just drop this into this book just to show you exactly how I would level up. I'm not too sure why it's copied and pasted it like this. I've never seen that before, but let's just get rid of that and copy these individually. That might be the difference. So drop this in here, animal, and then coloring book for kids, and then the image. So what we've got here is pretty much the same front cover, although we've only got it in a different style because we've obviously got it as we would do for our KDP publishing, because we've got our front cover and our back cover, which is what you need to upload to KDP. This is just a rough example of what it would look like kind of as a thumbnail. But then we've just moving this over to the page, and now we've got pretty much exactly the same cover as we had here, but just with a different background. Now, the second tip I'm going to drop in here that's really useful for your front covers is to have some sort of texture behind what your main elements are doing in your book. So at the moment, we've just got this block color, which does look nice. It's really bright, it's eye-catching, but it just lacks that little bit of texture and looks a little bit boring and a little bit simple. So loads of different things you can do for this. So if you type in something like background here and just press see all, you can see loads of different kind of textured backgrounds that you can put in. So you maybe have this and you can pull this over and then just drop this behind and then change the transparency of this to be a little bit darker. So you can start to see there's a little bit of depth to your front cover. It's not just this solid block cover. So you can do that, have a play around with loads of these different backgrounds and just kind of see which one you like. One I do like in particular is something called a sunburst. So if I just type in sunburst here, I'll use sunburst on some of my projects. Again, it kind of depends on what book you're doing, but it's just an example of a cool background that you can do for your books. And I'll just pull this all the way down. So actually, let's make sure these fit on the page and they're the right size, because I don't think I've dragged them down far enough. Drag this sunburst onto your front cover and then just pull this across. So the circle of the sunburst you can see here is right in the middle of your page, and the pink line should appear like that, as you can see, because we've got this element behind acting as our reference point. Once you've done that, just press crop and then just bring this all the way over to your front cover. And then do exactly the same with this side, like that. Maybe overflow it a little bit if you want to. So actually, let's just go and crop this and keep this, just hang it over a little bit just so we don't leave any space on the side of the book. And then change this to a black, which is going to look extremely daunting once you've done that, but that's fine. And then just move this, the order. So actually I'm using control and then that kind of brackets just to do this, kind of a Canva shortcut. And then just press this transparency here, bring the transparency all the way down, and you can see now we have a little bit of depth to our book cover. It's not just this one solid line, there's a little bit of 3D element to it. As you can see, the difference between something like this and then something like this is quite a big difference. This looks really basic and a bit boring. Literally just by adding in a background, for this example, I've just used sunburst, just makes it look a little bit more professional. So once we've done that with our background, the next thing I'm going to focus on is our text. And actually in this example, I don't mind the font here. Xmas Clause is quite a cool font. We're going to keep that font here. We're going to play around with the different effects that you can use it for. So the first thing actually we're going to do before we go for the effects is the color of the font. Animals is obviously we're going to have a main color as green as our background. So a color on top of that needs to kind of contrast against the green. And I kind of like the idea. For some reason, I think it must be it's linked to kind of safari or, desert, that sort of thing. But orange kind of always looks good for me on an animal coloring book. So we're going to go for green and orange in this page. And you can see there, that doesn't stand out too well. But if you just go up to effects and just press this outline, all of a sudden that makes the text pop out loads more than if you didn't have this outline. So you can see the big difference between that and something like this. And I'm just going to bring the color of this outline to black. And if you want to, you can kind of change the thickness of this as much or as little as you like. And also, of course, change the color here. So you can have a white kind of outline, green, whatever, to have a play around. But for me, generally speaking, black and white are the two ones that I'll use. For this example, I'm just going to use black. And then I'm going to do exactly the same for this here and this outline. And make this black. And you can see now this text just pops out a whole lot more than it was doing previously. And again, just looks a lot better than this book cover does here. So our text is popping out and it's easy to see against what is a really bright and colorful background. So the next tip in terms of making your book cover, this is kind of more specific to children's books. Again, if you're making an adult book, it might be a little bit different. But your book cover needs to be as colorful and as eye-catching as possible. And any sort of element that you can think relates to kids that's also really eye-catching and colorful, you should put onto your book cover. So even though this is a book cover about, a book about animals, you don't just have to include animals on your front cover. Because it's for kids, you can include anything that is to do with kids. So things like stars, things like rainbows, things like paintbrushes. They're all really colorful things, but they're all still related to kids. Obviously, as long as you have your main elements of your cover as animals, you can include loads of different things that just pop out and make your book look a lot better and also relate to your target market. So for example, it would be kids, but if it's adults, kind of think of different things that can relate to adults too. So for this book example, we're just going to go in and add something like a rainbow. Rainbows are also really cool things to add into your kids covers. If you just pop this in here, and I'm going to just drop this down right to the bottom and line it up something like that. So it has a little bit of space on the edge. And also uses pink guideline in the middle, as always, to make sure it's in the middle of our page. And then just drop this down a little bit like that. We're also then going to order this, so this elephant sticks out over the top. And you can see now we've got a little bit more color to our book. So our book is starting to take shape now. We've got a nice colored background. We have our cool text that has a really nice standout font and also the effects of the outline. We have our elephant here and we also have a little bit more color put into our book. So one thing I think we could also add into this book cover is adding a few more animals. So let's just go for animals and see what comes up. So we're going to go ahead and add in this little one. And because we've got our rainbow here, I think we're going to kind of use that rainbow to dictate what our cover looks like. So we're going to actually turn this raccoon so it looks a bit like that. And maybe make our elephant a little bit smaller, actually, as we mentioned that. Bring them in there. We're going to pull this over. And then let's go for another animal. Let's go for a lion. Pull the lion in. And I think when you're making something like a book cover like this, keeping your art that's on the front relatively similar styles is also really important. You can see this lion looks a little bit different kind of style to the elephant. It's not a huge amount of difference, but you know, if you're a bit of a perfectionist, I consider myself a little bit of a perfectionist when it comes to this sort of thing. You might want to make sure that these look exactly the same styles. But again, it is kind of entirely up to you. I'm just trying to work out whether or not it's better to have the animals over the top of the rainbow or behind the rainbow. I'm probably going to have them on top. That just makes it look like they're kind of, it's more of an animal coloring book than just like a rainbow coloring book. And now we're going to pull this raccoon over there, keep the elephant in the middle, and we're starting to build out this cover a little bit more now. So you can see we've got a couple more animals there, and this cover is starting to come to life. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit more going on in the image. We've got quite a lot of green space, or white space in this example, it's green. Generally speaking, I will try and avoid as much white space as possible. So that's basically any space that's not kind of doing anything for your book cover. It just looks a little bit boring and not that professional, but there are loads of different things you can implement to change that. So for this animal coloring book, we're going to go for something like paw prints because again, it's related to animals and it can fill in quite a bit of gaps. So let's just go for, animal prints actually and see what comes up there. So we don't want something like this. We want some smaller ones, so maybe something like this. It's related to animals, and it's kind of a nice filler as your background. Annoyingly, this element doesn't let us change color, so we're not going to use this because we don't want to use black in this example. What else have we got? Can we change this one? Yeah, so we'll change this, and we'll just make this a kind of a browny sort of color. That looks pretty cool. And then just make these a little bit smaller. And then what you can do is just copy and paste these and then try and build these out as actual like kind of paw print trails if you can. So and just go like that, and then just group those, and now we have a little bit bigger kind of paw print trail. I'm just going to drop a few of these in our page. Again, I might actually end up getting rid of these if I don't like them, but with making a book cover, it's kind of just trial and error. Have a play around with different elements. Some of it will work, some of it will look a little bit stupid, but we're just going to try this and see what this looks like. And just kind of scatter these around the page so it doesn't take, so it just fills in a lot of that boring white space. So with this idea of kind of reducing as much white space on your page as much as possible, something like stars can be a really good thing to add into your kids' book. Again, this is predominantly a kids coloring book, so if it was adults, maybe you could use stars or something else that's related to adults. But in terms of kids, stars, again, are really bright, allow the cover to kind of stand out a little bit more, and also relatable to any kind of kid. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything to do with animals. So this example, I'm probably going to get rid of these paw prints and put stars in instead. I've just actually copy and pasted some stars from another design that I've got. But you can just go into elements here and type in stars and just find loads of different examples of stars you can use. What I'm going to do with these, they don't stand out hugely on the page. Again, you can change the transparency if you want to make it even less. But I'm going to keep these as 100 and then just move these behind a lot of the text and make sure this just looks like it stands out a bit more than just without having the stars on there. So let's go ahead and just copy and paste all of these and drop the stars in. Again, really important you have the layering right. You don't want your stars to be over the top of your design because they're not the main part of this page. The main part of the page is the animals. So just keep the stars coming in like this. Go. And like that. And I might just drop another one in there just to make it a little bit more crowded in that middle section, which is kind of where a lot of the eyes are going to be. So there you go, we've got some stars as our background now, and it's just a nice little touch to bring out different elements. Having done that, actually, I think we might just make this elephant a little bit bigger because it's kind of the main part of our book cover. Change the order, so we need to bring this line forward, line backwards too, because the elephant is the most important thing. Although, that said, let's just move the element back. So you see, I'm kind of changing my mind as we make our way through here. That looks a lot cooler now. We've got those stars, which I think do make quite a big difference to this design. And again, these don't look too central. Annoyingly, they are because this elephant is, as you can see here, with these pink lines that show up. But the actual image of the elephant looks different because the image ends here with its trunk. And there's a load of white space here. But again, that is kind of me being really picky and not all that important. And then amongst the white stars, you can also include, or I like to include, a lot of kind of the golden stars. So let's try and find some ones that stand out really nicely and just look really cool and really attractive to children. Something like that. Bring that one, maybe make it a little bit smaller. Stick that there. This up here. And just kind of build out this front cover. These are such small elements that we're adding to our page, but they do make a huge amount of difference to the final outcome. It just makes it a lot more visually appealing for kids, which ultimately is the end goal of any kids book cover. And it's exactly the same making it appealing for adults when it comes to an adult book cover. So another cool thing you can do to your front cover is actually include something that's related to your book. So animal coloring book for kids, we're probably going to want to include how many pages are in this. So let's try and make this as visually appealing as possible. So we just go for star again, and this should be in shapes. Hopefully Canva have a star shape for us to use. So this looks pretty cool. Let's actually get rid of these here and then just drop this like that. And put that there, and then we're going to want to make this this kind of color, and then give it the outline, have a border maybe like that, and have it like this. Move these stars behind. There you go, and then make this a little bit smaller just so it fits on our page there. I think this needs to be a little bit brighter actually, so we're going to go for a brighter color, maybe something more towards the yellow side. That looks cool. And then just take some text, copy and paste it, and then just go for, let's just say this book had 50 coloring pages. Let's make this black and get rid of this effect. And then make this like this. And then just kind of build this out. So this is going to be a way of just showing the reader that A, it's an animal coloring book, but there's also 50 pages inside. So 50 there, and then just copy and paste this, and then go for pages. And then make this, I don't know, 40. A little bit smaller. There you go, 50 pages. So that just stands out a bit more. Again, have a play around with this font. You can change the color if you want to as well. Maybe white looks a bit better. No, white looks pretty bad there actually, but if we just put an outline on it, that might stand out a bit better. So we're going to go for white actually with the black background, and then do the same for this one, the background black, and then change the font to white. And you can see there at 50 pages, this probably needs to be a little bit smaller actually. Make it smaller. And there you go, 50 pages. And now our book cover is really coming to life, and we're actually not too far off finishing this. So again, we just want to fill in a lot of this space with color. So we've already gone for the rainbows at the bottom. So I'm going to include some more rainbows and see what kind of things we can put on top. That's kind of nice. That's also like a coloring kind of rainbow. So drop this in and just fill in a lot of that white, or in this case, green space, with just some cool colors that are going to be really attractive to our target audience. So pull in a rainbow here, and then maybe another one in behind here. And probably need one somewhere like that towards the top. And then maybe bring in some coloring pencils. These again, coloring pencils naturally are going to be quite colourful, quite cool to stick on the front of the book cover. Put some coloring pencils maybe in there. And just have a play around and just generally see if it looks good. I actually don't like this rainbow being here, so we're going to get rid of this. 50 pages. So it's there. I don't like this one either, this looks pretty bad, so I'm going to keep that away. As you can see as I'm doing this, I'm literally winging this as I go along, because that's kind of what you're doing when it comes to, well, that's what I do, when it comes to making a book cover. I actually don't like those pencils either, so we're going to go ahead and get rid of that. And then maybe what we could potentially do here is bring this up like that, and then make these bigger. So it fits across the whole page, and then just stick these like that. This might look absolutely terrible, so I might get rid of that. Actually, it doesn't look too bad. Actually, yeah, it does. We're not going to have that. What else can we put in for our book page? This is a little bit smaller actually, so this might look a little bit better. For these, actually, we're going to kind of get rid of these, or bring these down a little bit just so it sticks out a bit. And then there you go. So you can see the colouring pages, and that actually looks quite good now. We're starting to build this out a lot more. You can see where we've come from this, just this one boring design, all the way through to this front cover. This rainbow needs to be balanced out with another one, I think. So we might put that one there, for example, and then maybe draw this star away from the center a little bit. Just put that there. I actually don't like the color of the star, so we're going to change that too. So you can see how picky this can get. Again, depends on how picky you want to be with your cover. I quite like this color, or the color of the stars, which what we're going for. Let's just go for that. So I'm actually pretty happy with that for our front cover. All we're going to do now is create the back cover, which again is going to be very similar way we've just done the first one. Just pick and choose the main elements that you want to keep consistent across both your front and back cover. As we've done our green and also our sunburst here, just make sure that fits across the entire page, and then also add that there. Get rid of this, and then we're probably going to want to include the stars in there too, just so it makes it a little bit more consistent. Again, this is entirely up to you, and this is the back page is much less important than the front page. It kind of depends what book you're doing. If I'm doing a coloring book, I will always just have example images of the coloring pages on the background. One thing that is definitely worth noticing too here is if you change the transparency of this, let's just get rid of this here, and then click on the background, make this transparent, or really low transparency. You can see where the barcode is. Just be very careful of where your barcode is, not to cover that up in your design. But for this example, I'm not going to publish this book, so I don't need to worry too much about it, but the barcode is going to be somewhere there. So generally just keep this kind of blank. And like I say, the back cover isn't quite as important as your book. If I'm just doing a coloring page a coloring book for kids or adults, whatever it may be, I would usually just do something like this. I'll have an example of the coloring pages in the book. So I'll have a transparent there and just make a border. And then all I'll have is the different images I'm using in my book. Maybe I have one there. Let's make this a little bit bigger. I'll just have 4 images on the back of the cover, like that. And again, making sure I don't cover this barcode. Maybe bring this all the way up to somewhere like that. There. And then also to there. Again, the back cover is not as important as the front cover. So again, have a play around with the different back covers that you want. For coloring books, I'll generally use examples, like I say, of the pages. But if it's any sort of book, just kind of use the back cover as you want it to. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't make a load of different elements like this, because that's not so important. Just keep the back cover super simple and exactly on point with what the type of book you're making is. And that's exactly how you can create a book cover that goes from something like this, which is super boring, into a really exciting and more engaging book cover like something like this. I actually, if I had to be critical, would probably change this star up a little bit. It doesn't look that great. But have a play around, kind of use the tips that you included in here. So things like really bright colors, things that relate to your niche. So in this example, rainbows for kids or stars for kids, different text styles you can use, and also the different effects, different colors, and also just relatability to your niche again. So this is a coloring book, so coloring pencils look really cool. And the main thing about this book is animals. And the first thing you see when you land on this page is this big elephant and these 2 other animals here. So that's exactly how I would take a book cover from something like this into something like this as a final product. Again, for those of you that want to know, just press share, download, and then download as PDF print if you want to use that for your design. If someone does actually want this design for their animal coloring book, then do let me know. I'm more than happy for you to use it. Maybe let me know down in the comments and I'll do some sort of giveaway if you do want to use it. But that's exactly how I would take a boring coloring book from something like this into something like this. It has been a different kind of type of video to what you're used to seeing on this channel. So if you did enjoy the video, then please do leave a like, and also let me know if there's anything that I can improve on this kind of content going forward. Again, it's very different to what I've kind of usually done. It might have been a bit boring at times, but hopefully I've included everything that you need to know of how I've gone from here all the way to here in terms of my book cover design. But thanks again very much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.